Welcome to House of Games, the podcast about games in general and game development in particular. With my guest remotely this time.
Brune, hello.
We're doing the episode remotely instead of in person, as we have done before. Since I'm currently in Stockholm and you, my co-host, is in Umeå.
Yes, and soon I will be in Japan, so we have to keep doing these remote episodes, I suppose.
I think it's sort of a blessing and a curse, because in part it gives us probably easier way to record episodes remotely and be able to record more. But at the same time, I think there's some chemistry that really can't be replicated when you're not in person.
And especially when we don't even see each other.
Yeah.
But we get used to it. And also, we are currently making like a couple of fillers episodes since the studio floor is being renovated, right?
Exactly. For some reason, the studio that we're using had sort of an unannounced floor repair that will take about a month to do. Meanwhile, we're doing some kind of filler episodes to flesh out the content more, and maybe you, the listeners, get to know us, the hosts, a little bit better.
Yeah, the idea is to have guests pretty much every episode, we hope, at least. But since we're doing this remotely now, we will just do a duo episode. And I don't know, we just had a small chat before we started recording what we should talk about. And as it turns out, I am currently bug testing my Red Colony series, which is getting a physical release in December, it says. But I guess that's up to me if I can fix these bugs. So I guess that will be one of the topics today. And then also we will talk about what we've been playing, and I don't know, let's see where the conversation brings us.
I'm kind of interested with the testing, because that, I think, is a topic that's sort of interest both to small indie developers and to big studios, because usually there's memes and there's jokes about Bethesda and other companies, CG Projekt Red with the Cyberpunk recently, where testing is, I mean, it's easy to say that some bugs in Skyrim or whatever game it might be, that they should just done more testing, but I think it's like really difficult to really try all use cases and find all bugs, because it's really, really dependent on like the system you're using and like the hardware you're using and loads of factors. And I understand it's the same for you.
Yeah, it's a lot of work bug testing, and it's funny because I can't remember if I told you this like off air or if we talked briefly about it in one of the previous episodes, but whatever, I'll tell the story again. I remember when Red Colony 1 came out, you know, I've been bug testing the hell out of it. I reckon I could play through the entire game with blindfolders on and not run into a single bug. And then it was released, and I saw this guy from Japan who uploaded like GIFs or just short clips from the game where it just broke over and over and over again. And that sucks to see, but it just tells how hard it is to find all the bugs. And think about Red Colony, it's a super linear game. I mean, it's just left to right all the time. And yet we were unable to find all the bugs. So basically I'm doing the bug testing myself, and then I send it to my publisher. It's like a 2-man team. One of them can sort of help with bug testing sometimes, and it depends on his schedule. So we're only 2-3 people tops that can bug test these games, and we of course try everything, but yet we can't find all the bugs. So now I'm currently, we're about to release the physical release for the Red Colony trilogy, and I feel like they are more strict than a digital release, because all these games were greenlit before. So it's odd that we are doing the bug testing thing again, and the bugs they're finding is just more complicated than before, or the things they do to trigger the bugs are more complex. And I wonder if that has something to do with the fact that it is a physical release, that it should be a more solid game, that you shouldn't have to download some patch or something like that, which is really cool in terms of I mean, for me personally, I'm learning things by doing these bug testing things. One of the bugs, for example, that was reported yesterday, which I've been fixing today, is that when you, in Red Colony 3, there are like 2 locations where you can answer a phone call and there's a zombie nearby. So if you answer the phone call just when you get attacked by a zombie, she will, well, fight him off, and then you sort of and then the zombie will just stand there and wait for the phone call to be over. And that's just, it looks silly, but that's, I mean, what else can you do really? So that's fine. But if the player has only 1 health left, which means that the second you answer the phone call and the zombie attacks you at the same time, she will then die while talking on the phone, and then it will take you to the game over screen, and then the game freezes. You can't press on anything because the conversation is still active, and the game is trying to find the next sort of button from a coding perspective. So it's trying to reach that load button in the background, and yeah, the whole thing freezes. So that kind of thing is, of course, I never try that. And the craziest thing is that this like talk function, it's in void update, which means it updates every frame of the game. So you have to be damn unlucky to trigger that bug. Like you talk to someone the same frame that the zombie attack animation starts, and then it's too late and you're frozen in that state, and then the game, you have to turn it off.
Interesting. It's sort of sounds almost like penetration testing except for games. But what is the conversation with Nintendo? I assume it is. Are you getting like emails, or do you have like meetings with them, or how is that like process for you?
Well, from what I've heard and understand, Nintendo are the pickiest company when it comes to these things, which I think is also a good thing. If of course this sucks being in this quagmire. This bug testing period has been for like 2 months. So let's say I fix a couple of bugs, I send it to my publisher, who then uploads it to some, I don't know. This is the stuff I don't really know, the publishing bits. But I imagine it's some sort of Steam client, but for Nintendo. So let's say it's some sort of Nintendo portal. So they maybe upload it there, and someone from Nintendo plays the game, find the bugs, they report to my publisher, and then they email me, all in Japanese. Because my publisher is in Japan, and this physical release in particular is Asia only, so we're only sort of in touch with the Japanese Nintendo crew. I don't really talk to them directly, it's via the publisher, which can also be quite frustrating sometimes. When they explain a bug, I can't find it because it's not explained properly, or sometimes you sort of need to have sometimes they will send like a video as well when they bug test it, so you can look at this video, and then they will point out where the bug is, and then you have to go in there and fix it. Sometimes I can't, because maybe they done something that I didn't do when I played it, and some bugs can be triggered like 10 minutes prior to whatever footage you get. So sometimes it's really, really hard to figure out how they triggered it, and even though they explain it, I tried the same way and it doesn't happen for me. That's it's tricky.
Yeah, I was actually gonna ask about that, like for screenshots and videos and stuff, because I work with testing in regular IT. I always try to embed a GIF or a video or something, because I think it can be really hard for developers to understand like what the issue is or why it is an issue without some kind of visual representation. And sometimes I know even people in the testing business, sometimes when they aren't as organized as maybe you should be, that you could just write that something is like this text is too big, or this just doesn't work, and no extra description. And when something just doesn't work, it's not enough of a description. So something that seems appropriate for the developer might not seem appropriate for the user. So that's sort of a really, really difficult thing to like get every time, I suppose.
Yeah, and that's the thing, you can tell when you're working with people who knows sort of gaming more like in depth, they're pretty good at pointing things out like that, like how, or they can sometimes even give a theory why they think this bug was triggered. But if you work with someone who doesn't really know how to code or how to make games at all, that's when that can happen, when they say this doesn't work, and then it's like,
yeah,
what is not working? Because the person who's bug testing it or whatever doesn't really know how games are being made. So you can tell when some, like, a professional bug tester is testing your game versus just, I don't know, someone who's not as experienced. And another cool, fun, weird thing, I suppose, is that you have different bug testers for different regions as well, as far as I can tell. Because the Red Colony 3, when that came out digitally, it was greenlit in Europe/America, but not in Japan. And that was also kind of weird. So I suppose that's like different teams depending on where the game is released. I do hope moving forward that things will become more universal. There's so much work just to make different games for different regions, with all this sort of PGI rating boards and the context in the content in the game. You know, some regions want to censor it, others are fine with it. So it would be cool if, I don't know, the digital space was more like international water, sort of like anything goes, or, you know, there's like the rules apply same everywhere. But unfortunately that's not the case, and it's just like so much extra work, especially as a indie dev, to make your game playable in all regions.
I think in any industry, even the one that I am in, I think bureaucracy and government is usually the last people to innovate when it comes to like IT or entertainment industries. So I think that's also really hard to fix.
Yeah, but yeah, it's kind of strange because in the digital space, because for example, Knife Boy, which is coming out, I don't know, in a couple of months maybe, it's translated to Chinese and traditional Chinese and what's the other one called? Simplified Chinese. So the one for Taiwan and the one for main China. Then I believe it's in China where you're not allowed to show intestines. And Knife Boy, he can slice through enemies, and that's like, or is it bones? I think this is a Buddhist thing.
Yeah, I think it does ring a bell when you say like bones, because I remember, I think World of Warcraft had a similar issue where you're not allowed to show like religious symbols or something, and like magic and like, for example, animated skeletons are considered some kind of religion or affiliated thing. So they had to censor that and just give them like full torsos instead of having like visible rib cages.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the issue with Knife Boy. But we said, or at least I think, we are not gonna release it there. But I mean, it's translated to Chinese, so if you're from China, you can still, use a VPN and download it. And this is sort of my point, that it's so easy to get access to everything anyway, even in China, which is sort of the internet is, it's not the same as other places, but you can still get access to the things you want if you really want it. So that's also a bit odd. That's a bit weird. It's kind of like in the States, you're not allowed to drink in public, but if you put it in a paper bag, it's fine. We all know what's in the paper bag, but
exactly.
So it's so easy to circumvent the rules, which makes it, I don't know, kind of weird, or just like, I don't know. I guess because I'm making games, for me it's just annoying, and I wish it wasn't like that, because it's just annoying.
Yeah, exactly. But for me also, I'm sort of a free speech absolutely. So to me, I think that especially with games that are like very, very non-essential for society, I think that you should be able to just publish things as is, assuming it's functional, of course, and then people could just decide to buy it or not buy it. It feels to me like, without having published a title yet, but it feels to me that they put like too much value into the individual games that go on stores. So they think that if a game doesn't meet this or that standard, then that reflects badly on the whole like platform, which it shouldn't, in my opinion at least.
True. And like you say, games are not, what did you say, non-essentials things for society?
It's non-essential for society. I mean, if hypothetically some kind of EMP would wipe out all game companies in the world, I mean, sure you would have a problem with unemployment, that would be bad, but I think like nobody would die from not being able to play games. Therefore, you should be able to like experiment with it and do whatever you want, in my opinion.
It's I have a really weird conspiracy theory about all of that. I haven't really thought it out, but I can sort of say it now. What I was thinking, and that is that games are super essential to society in the way that if we are moving towards a matrix. So in this conspiracy theory of mine, I'm sort of thinking, you see all these game companies buying up as much as they can, just gobbling up everything. And then I was like, that's kind of weird. And then I'm thinking, like, imagine if we are moving towards this sort of matrix society. Then you probably want to be the game company that owns most games. The game company that owns most games also owns the most universes where people want to live their lives once we switch over to this matrix. And in that way, you become like the new real society. Let's say PlayStation wins this battle and everyone goes to PlayStation, and then we all connect to the PlayStation VR 10, and then we just becomes these batteries, used to make like this Matrix movie reference, but we don't have to become Matrix batteries, but just, you know, we spend more times in games than we do in the real world, which is definitely the case with a lot of people already. But imagine if that becomes the standard, and then I actually made a drawing of this many years ago, maybe 10 years ago. I just had a bunch of cylinders with old people in, and then they had like this Visa card, like a credit card, inserted to this cylinder. And then the idea of this painting was that when you retire, you just hook yourself up to this virtual reality. And that credit card just keeps ticking, and then when you run out of money, there's like this spike on top of the cylinder that will just like basically kill you, and then it dumps you, and then it just dumps you into this ocean.
Holy shit!
I can send you a picture if I can find it. Anyway, so that was so I like to think that the game companies want to become that major platform where people live their digital lives, and in that sense games are super essential, and it's super important that you are liked to get people to hook up to your world. But then there's another cool or weird theory in my conspiracy theory, when games are becoming censored and stuff like that. For example, nudity is something we censor a lot. That means like in this new reality of ours, nudity is no more, you know, like because it will eventually become completely erased from human history, and other things too, of course. Yeah, that's just one of many weird conspiracy theories that I like to think about sometimes. But yeah, it's I wonder.
Oh my god, there's the picture.
Yeah.
Damn. Let's do this as the thumbnail for the episode. Very interesting.
Yeah.
But then let me offer a counterpoint to that point. I would say that my sort of estimation of how things are going to be going forward is that it's going to be, sure, in some sense you have like the metaverse and other similar efforts to just try to corporatize everything and just make it bigger and more unified into a single, mega entity. Some point, but on the other end of that spectrum, you also have things like the indie game revolution. Like in the last couple of years, the threshold for publishing a game and making a living out of it, from what I could see at least, has become smaller and smaller. So that means that in the past, I mean, if you look at the number of people who could produce a game and release it in the, say, 70s, was really, really, really tiny piece of society.
Yeah, that's true though. With more people can publish their games and all that, which leads into another. I wouldn't say this is a conspiracy theory, but something I worry about though. With that, and this is also one of the things I think about a lot, but I never really said it out loud, so I'm not sure if I will be able to make a point of it. I probably need to sort of practice saying it. But yeah, in the past, it was difficult or impossible to publish a game unless you had a publisher and tons of money, especially if you go back to the Nintendo 8-bit and 16-bit era when you had to buy the cartridges and all that from Nintendo and so on. But now, I think the golden era for indies are sort of not dead, but it's... I always think, imagine if I released the Red Colony games, for example, 8 years ago, or when PlayStation 3 had their online store. Remember, like Pixel Junk, was it Pixel Junk? What, Monster Junk? Those games, they sold like butter because it was new, it was fresh, and like the horse uniform in Oblivion, I believe it was $5 for a uniform to your horse, and they sold tons of them. Because this was like sort of new and fresh and cool. And I remember back then too, especially with the PlayStation 3, I would just buy every online game that came out because there were very few. And once they came out, I was like, yeah, I'll totally try it. So now the market is so overflooded that I almost feel like we have gone full circle, and now you need a publisher again for like, I have a tiny publisher, but if you have a little bit bigger publisher, you know, they can go in with a lot of, you know, they have the contacts, they have the money to promote your game and all that stuff. So I part of me feel like we're almost going back to like that point again, where you need a publisher again to have a chance to sell something. Now, granted, you can still publish your games. I mean, I'm doing it with a tiny publisher, but also before I had a publisher, I published some games. So you can, of course, do it. And if your games are really good, they will probably speak for themselves. So I'm sort of putting an end to my own theory here that you need a publisher, but at the same time, you sort of need a publisher because it's getting so hard to get recognized when there's so many games coming out all the time.
Yeah. Well, I would say, so there is, this was the guy, I think, who made Slime Farmer. His name is Nick Popovich. Sorry if I butchered that name. But he did a GDC talk called Making Games That Stand Out and Survive from 2019. So what he opened the talk with was that he said that you are, as a developer, you are not only competing with all of the other games that are released on Steam, which is like over 1,000 a day or something, I think. And you're also, besides that, you're competing with Netflix, you're competing with going outside, you're competing with quality time with friends and family. But I think maybe I'm foolishly optimistic, having not released a game yet. But I think that that's not necessarily true. I mean, sure, there are times when you rather watch Netflix than play a specific game because it's not good enough. There are like 1,000 games that are released every day on Steam. But I think still, because there are a lot of games, anyone can make literally make a JPEG and release it as a game on itch.io, call it a game. But I think if you have creativity and a niche idea and something that nobody else has quite done before, or you improve upon some concepts that nobody has done before, I think there still is opportunity. Because even if there are 1,000 games released on Steam every day, many of them are asset flips that will never like reach anywhere because there is no creativity in it. And just because of the numbers, they don't get like the majority of the traffic anyway. There's probably a handful of games that get like real big traffic, say. So I think even though, I mean, and also that goes with publishers as well, having not had any experience with them, so take this with a grain of salt. But I think, yes, that probably publishers are a way to just get a step up over the asset flips and everyone who makes trash or less professional games, I suppose. But I think, so maybe my history is off on this, so anyone can correct me if they want. But Minecraft, for example, they just did a really early release. I think they released with the alpha. They had very little functionality and they just built over that for a long time. And at least I don't remember that they've had like a specific publisher or something. That the way I heard about it was from a friend who just played it on his laptop. Then it just spread like word of mouth, and then like wildfire, because he had like a niche idea. That I would say is probably because the market and technologies have developed so much that you can just create your own game and just release it, and then if it's really good, then there is a chance that it will get lots of attention, in my mind at least.
Yeah, no, you had some good points there. There were like 3 things you said that I reacted to, but I forgot what it was. But point is, there were good point. I feel like I'm taking mine back a little bit. But when you said maybe we're back to where you need a publisher to stick out from all the assets flips, that's a good way of putting it, I suppose, because you're right that we need to make like all the games have already been done, so you really have to make something niche. There's 2 things here. One thing that sucks is that when you make a game, let me think, you don't want to make a game just to hope it will sell. Of course you want it to sell, but you still want to make a game because you're passionate about it. But if that passion is not niche enough, it might not sell at all, which is just unfortunate. Because if it doesn't sell enough, then you will never be able to turn it into a career or something like that. So that's something to keep in mind, and that kind of sucks, but that's just, the reality. But also, you need to when I think about making games, I usually think about making games that I would like to play. So the Red Colony series, which I think is quite niche, I mean, it's like Bachelor versus Resident Evil versus B-movie from the 80s or something like that. It's just like this, it's almost like a silly 2D horror game. And I would love if someone else made that types of games. Not too long, not too short, and just like a kind of wacky story. That would be awesome. But that's why I made them, because I just never seen anyone else make that kind of game. And of course, making the games were super fun, especially writing the story. I feel like, because I do feel like it's quite niche, not super niche, but they help though, because I feel like there is a quite hardcore Red Colony fan, community that picked up all 3 games. I mean, you can see that on the sales, that of course they got less and less from each game, but still, whoever played the 3rd game probably played the first one, and that would be like the sort of hardcore audience that really enjoy these types of games. And I would love to keep making these games, but I'm a developer, and I'm not like I want to try different things. But so that's true, that if you make something niche, it will probably help you. But at the same time, it sucks that you have to think like that, because you kind of want to make whatever you want to make, or at least I hope that's how people make games, and not just thinking about making money, which probably a lot of people do when you look at the asset flips games, sort of simple stuff like that.
Still, exactly, that was what I was gonna come to, that if you make something niche, then you have a really good opportunity to bring something new and maybe sell a lot of games. But I also believe that making games that you would want to play yourself is the best way forward. I think we sometimes forget that video games in general are quite a young industry. So I don't know the exact date, but say if you really, really stretch it, maybe you could say like the first game was Pong, was it in the 50s or 60s or something? But that's not even 100 years. So I think that you shouldn't, not use it specifically, but people in general shouldn't underestimate the number of things that you can create, and the things that you like, the stories you can tell and stuff. If you look at the medium of books, for example, how old is that? I don't know, 5,000 years maybe. And still today, not some other year, but this today and this year and continuously is the year that we printed more books. I think more like in the last 12 months there's more books printed than ever before in history. something like that, or it was more like published books or something. And I would say that nobody would claim that books are out of ideas, because even if you have like stories that's been done before, you have the classic tropes of man versus nature, man versus self, and so on. But there's still, you can make new twists on it, and you can improve something, and you can also take ideas that maybe were old or have been like overused, but take those ideas from a long time ago and then just reinvent them for a new audience of today. And again, I agree that it would be great if you could just make the games that you want to make, but you have to sort of innovate to make a new twist on it. But at the same time, you could see it sort of as a blessing, because you have to improve upon yourself. You can't just make something that already exists or something that's already been done the exact same way. You have to make it better or make your own twist on it. American McGee's Alice, I think, is a really good example of that. So the story of Alice in Wonderland is by this time sort of an old story, but when he did it, I think in the early 2000s, I think. But then he released American McGee's Alice, but he did sort of a dark twist on it. So instead of just being like this everyday girl who just falls down a rabbit hole and then realizes at the end that she's dreaming, so instead she's a schizophrenic and just imagines all those things, but it's sort of caused by the death of her family and lots of other stuff. So the whole story is a lot darker, but that is sort of an old story because that's been done before, but it's sort of still unique. So it is a blessing and a curse, but I would say us, the consumers, we're much better off for it because we have so much options for just about anything.
That's true. And also I'm thinking like another problem when you have to make something niche or unique to stick out from the masses is that that's also a risk to do that, because even though we gamers like to say this is art and all that stuff, I feel like we are usually going back to the same types of games, and the sort of the best-selling games are usually the most mainstream sort of military shooters, or I don't know, the games that seems to do as little as possible to do something new. Or if you look at like Uncharted 1, 2, 3, 4, they're all somewhat samey. And I'm not saying that, like, for example, my games, Red Colony 1, 2, 3, they're very samey, all three of them, obviously. But, you know, Tomb Raider, Uncharted, Gears of War, like, they are playing the cards safe to make them sell. But I do also think that sometimes you have these, like the Elden Ring, for example, wouldn't be considered a mainstream game, and that's just selling like crazy and people love it. So yeah, and if you look at Minecraft as well, no one could have expected or assumed that would sell anything, and then it's just one of the biggest game of all time. And the second biggest games of all time is Grand Theft Auto 5, and that I would say is, you know, it's not trying something super different. It's just like a really damn good game. And of course you can look at the game itself and say, well, it's totally doing different things comparing to Grand Theft Auto 1, 2, 3, 4 or Saint Row or other similar games. But I don't know, I guess this conversation I started with some theory or an argument about something, which I sort of went back on and took it back, and then we have given like 5 different examples of how things can go, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So now it's almost like it is what it is. It's sort of, in the end of the day, things are just what it is.
But I think also the point that you're touching on, that like the big games, they usually do play it safe and usually stick to the same formula. I mean, look at the Call of Duty games, for example. But I think that's also just a symptom of the industry being very young, because let's not forget that in like my circle or your circle or friends, we do play games, and usually most of us do play games, but that is kind of a new thing. If I would talk to my parents and ask them how many are in their like friend circles or people they know or acquaintances play games, then I would say probably none of them, or maybe 1 or 2 out of 100. So I think if you look at other mediums, as I said before, books, they've been around for a long time, so they sort of saturated society. So there's nobody who's just never read a book in my circles. And if you look at movies, the same thing. Everybody watches movies. And I think maybe this will take 200 years, I don't know. But at some point, I think video games also will saturate the entire of society. So at that point, I mean, right now you have like a specified class of people that are called gamers, and they have like a specific taste, and that's what like the big games cater to. But I would say if you would saturate the entire society, because I think there is value in games for everyone. Everyone probably has something that they like, or some way that they like. Some people maybe like puzzle games, other people like story games, other people like very difficult games. But I think if video games would saturate the entire society, you would probably have a much larger market, and therefore you would be able to do very niche things, or you would maybe be able to do something that's catered to something that probably wouldn't sell today. But if the market is bigger, then there's just more tastes, and even if your game isn't one of the big ones, it doesn't matter, because you can still make an average game and make a really good living on it, the same way that you can on like a book or movies, for example. But I think just the market is too small still, so that you have to be sort of one of the top games to really make it.
Yeah, or like I mentioned before, when things are new, it tend to be. I mean, I think Street Fighter 3 on the Nintendo Switch sold tons of copies, and that game has been around forever. And the Switch is, it was just a new flashy device. People wanted to play games on it. I dabble a lot in the crypto space, and that was, I mean, now before it crashed, it was just like new coins every day, and the hype was just every coin just skyrocketed and then crashed soon after. But
that's like the crypto space has been, at least for and up until now, I think, like the Wild West. There's just there's ICOs, and there's no control, and some people fail, some people succeed, and there's just but I think that's I agree that I do enjoy like being in those like periods of times, those small slivers of when something is completely new. But it is also sort of a double-edged sword, I think, because it's nice if you are in the in group that does produce the things that is sort of a protected market. But it's not as nice for example, other people trying to get in that have like a really high threshold, or for the consumer. I mean, sure, I think even in the beginning there was great games on Switch, but I think more games and more choices are better for consumers, because that means, I mean, the competition is tougher, but that's something the customer enjoys, I suppose, even if that's harder on the people producing games. So it's hard for me to say which one I would prefer.
Yeah, I mean, it's because I tend to think that, like, when I lived in Tokyo, I always compared it to living inside the internet. It's like you walk outside and you ask yourself, what am I going to do today? Everything is there. It's just so wacky. It's the same thing you can do online. It's like, what weird stuff am I going to do today? And then, it's there, whatever it is. But I was so fascinated in Tokyo. You walk like this this alleyway into another alleyway, and then this small street, and then in a corner of a building it's like a 3 square feet bar, and it's packed with people. I mean, it only fit like 3 people in there, but it's always people there. And it's like, man, that's so cool that this business can survive on like 3 customers at a time, because that's all that fits in there. And this is a true story about this bar I went to. 3 seats, or stand-up seats, so you couldn't sit, but you had to stand up. It's all that fit in this bar, and it's like, wow, this is a niche thing, and he has his regulars, and that's enough for him to survive. And I think that when I sort of think about my career with games, if I'm gonna keep making them myself and so on, I have that sort of idea too. Like I just hope that I can have regulars, but it's not the same thing because I don't want to do the same games over and over again. I want to do all types of games, but I do hope somewhere that I get some regulars that will always sort of be up to date with what I'm working on and sort of be like, Runic Codes is releasing a game again. I'm gonna check it out because I enjoyed Knife Boy or whatever, because that could then help sort of keep the company alive. You know, I'm alone, so you know it is what it is. But I never really think anymore that those days when you could release almost anything, like I said, a horse costume for $5 is the amount of money they made on that is insane. Or a lot of their early games that, yeah, some of them I guess were quite unique in many ways. But my point is, I think that we will see. You will have the sort of AAA industry that will make games based on statistics and based on algorithms just to sort of hook you. And then I think you will have the indie scene is the one that will bring new ideas to the table. But I do fear, or I don't necessarily fear it, but I do think that these sort of Minecraft stories will be less and less, even though they are quite few, I suppose. But you usually hear about those crazy indie devs that just made the biggest games since sliced bread. But I feel like it's getting harder and harder to make those games because it's so much competition. But I do hope that a lot of indie devs can just sort of feel fine in having a small audience that just keeps your passion alive. So you don't have to think, I want to make this game, but it's not gonna sell enough or whatever. I will never be able to expand as a studio or something like that. So I do hope that indie devs, or I sort of think that's where indie devs will find their place eventually. That they will have their regulars and they will make niche things that maybe eventually they can make enough profits to make bigger games. But I do think as soon as you make more money and you can make bigger games, you will play it more safe because the losses are more extreme. So I'm not sure what my point is, but it's just I was gonna say, because you said there are not enough gamers yet, but you know, imagine when everyone else is playing games too. Well, then you also have more competition and more game studios making games to compete for customers to play them and so on. So my point here was to say that I do hope that we will see indie devs just surviving based on their regular customers, so to speak. Because then I think from that, greater things can happen. Like imagine you have some weird indie dev doing something quite unique, but the game is not quite there yet. You kind of want to hope that he can make another game and then he gets it right. And that thing he did in that game will have such an impact on other games, even the AAA space, that those studios implement it and so forth. So I hope that will happen, that more gamers will play and so on.
Interesting. So I have two analogies for why I'm still optimistic, I think. So the first one is for the game developer and the second one is for the consumer. So why I'm optimistic about video games and for game indie developers is, I would say that, so I thought to myself as you were talking about, so is it more difficult to make like really games that explode, or will it become more and more difficult or easier? And to me, I think video games are a bit like books actually. So the way they're similar is that both books and video games are sort of, the threshold to making either books or video games has been lower and lower. So at the beginning, there's just a few people who are even literate in what, even how to make them or read them or understand them. And then the threshold has been with the printing press and like the home computer, the way to make video games has become easier and easier. And if you look at, for example, somewhat semi-recent in the history of books, Harry Potter. So there's like a really unknown author who just had a good idea and just exploded like no one has done for a really, really long time. And I think the same is probably possible as well with games, because the way to make games, you don't, for example, movies. I thought about it if that's become easier or harder. And I think that hasn't really changed that much because you still need to employ people, and you can't do it by yourself. But as with books, video games, the technologies are becoming a lot cheaper and easier, and computer hardware is getting better and better, so you can make more and more all by yourself. So I think there is, from my perspective at least, some optimism that, going forward, that you can make something really explode. Although I would say that your idea of having regulars and making like a good living on games is probably what people should aim for. I think maybe we're overemphasizing like the big ones too much, and just having a good regular crowd is also like acceptable and fine and can even be great, I think.
Yeah, I do think that the expectations of being the next Minecraft is quite in people's minds, but somewhere I think, yeah, if you have your regulars or you make enough to get by, that's a pretty nice place to find yourself in, because then you can work with what you're passionate about, and you have, and then like you said, that could eventually lead to bigger things. But yeah, it's good fun just to be able to make what you like. And if you find and as more people play games, more people might find your games and so on. So
here's my last analogy for the consumer, why you should be happy as a consumer. So there was this king, I think his name was Louis the 16th. I think the last king before the French Revolution. Anyway, the story goes that every night he would, for dessert after dinner, he would have 40 bakers make him a unique dessert, and he would pick one of them and they would just throw away the other 39. Compared to the rest of the people, he was unfathomably rich to be able to do just one thing like that. But if you compare it to today, you can walk into any grocery store and have like the same selection of items, and even more than he had at his time, which means in one way we're richer now and we're able to like experience more than a king did back in the day. So we're sort of more like kings now. So in the same way, I think in the, for example, 70s, if you would want to buy like 10 games, that would probably cost a lot of money compared to what it does now. And I think what you have to choose from as a consumer is better and better, and the quality gets better and better, and the price gets lower. So I think also from the consumer perspective, there is also like reason to be optimistic, I think. I think we've gone like over an hour almost.
Yeah, close to an hour. It was fun.
Very good discussion, I think.
We started with some some weird conspiracy theory that the game companies are buying up everything just so they can create a matrix for us to live in, and then it led into indie games versus mainstream. Yeah, that was good. Should we wrap it up for this episode? Maybe we can...
Speaking of like selling games and stuff, do you want to plug where can they find you? How do you get updated about your latest releases and news? And
as I mentioned in a previous episode, I'm not really online that much, but I do have a Twitter account. So there's at Runic Codes and at Rune She Storm. That's where you can find updates, yeah, when I have them. So, And you?
Well, it's yeah, exactly. I am even less online than you, I think. I don't even have a Twitter. But I do have a blog. So my URL, if you want to read about, I'm making a small game together with my brother. So that you can find me at medium.com at Otto Wretling. So that's spelled OTTOWRETLING. So that's where you can find my blog and some updates on what I'm developing and stuff.
All right, Odo. Nice talking to you this time. Should we close the door for today's episode?
Think so.
Yeah, all right.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.